I'd like you to imagine for a moment you're sat at home one day when suddenly you hear a knock at the door. Confused, you open the door and see two policemen standing before you. They barge in, arrest you, and let you know that you're going to be charged in connection with a crime you didn't commit. Confused, you tell them time and time again that you're innocent, but regardless, you're set before a jury, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. It's only after you spend 11 years in prison that you will finally be exonerated on the basis of DNA evidence. For Ronald Cotton, this is a story he doesn't have to imagine. At 22 years old, the story I just described became his life. He was accused of raping the woman pictured above, Jennifer Thompson, after she falsely identified him in an eyewitness lineup. What makes this case particularly interesting is that Jennifer Thompson made really careful consideration to memorize all the features she could of her attacker. That way, if she had the opportunity, she could correctly identify him later. She identified what his height looked like, the skin color, what his clothes were, and his facial features. How then do such grave errors in memory occur, especially in instances when we really feel confident in our memory? Well, the answer is that we're probably thinking about memory in the wrong way. Now, a lot of us like to think about memory like a filing cabinet. And so we perceive and encode events, and then it just gets stored away, perfectly preserved in the little filing cabinet at the back of our brain. Well, the truth of the matter is that memory doesn't work like this. We don't have little men in our brain who go to the back of the filing cabinet, pull a file, and bring it to our brain's forefront, where it plays the same way that we encoded it. The truth of the matter is, memory is not preserved in any way. In fact, memory may not even be stored. According to Bartlett, memories are in fact recreated when we want to remember events. The recreated series of events, however, is slightly different than what we first saw. In this way, memory is a reconstructive process. So I'd like you to imagine for a moment you're the girl sat here in front of this scene. There's several things happening, and so you might believe that one by one you slowly begin to encode events. You might slowly encode the kids playing with this pencil here, the boy on the scooter, and the kids playing basketball. It's easy to think that these memories remain preserved, and if we ever wanted to remember them, we could simply replay these memories in our mind. The truth of the matter is, though, that they are constantly in a cycle of being altered by previous experiences and events that occur after we initially encode the scene. Now, when you're asked to recall the scene, it might appear quite similar, but if you look closely, you'll notice that several things have changed. The activities of the children are now different, and the weather, in fact, has changed as well. One of the factors that memory is influenced by is our expectations for events. So based on what we expect to happen, we might remember something slightly different. In one study, participants were asked to come into the lab for what they thought was going to be an experiment. The experimenter told them it would just be a few moments and they would just have to sit in this office wait room until the experimenter was ready. Finally, the participants, after waiting a couple minutes alone in the office room, were brought into a new room and told the truth about the experiment. Rather, they were told to list all the details they could remember about the office room they were previously in. This led to some interesting events. So what we found was that participants were really good at remembering information they expected to see. And so in a typical office setting, we expect things like chairs to be present. And so what we found is memory for those objects were really good. People were really able to remember those items. However, information we expected to see also detrimented memory. And so in a typical office setting, we might also expect to see something like books. In this case, a lot of people remembered seeing books when in fact they weren't there. And so people's expectations for a typical office setting influenced what they remembered seeing. In this case, creating a false memory of books when in fact they were not there. What's also interesting is that it not only created false memories, but it also resulted in the absence of others. So for example, there was a skull in the office, but because a skull does not fit in with our expectations for a typical office setting, a lot of people didn't remember seeing it there. In this way, we can see that our expectations guide what we remember and can actually create false memories for events that didn't occur. Or, in the case of the skull, can result in an incomplete version of events. We also see this with typical crimes. So, for example, one experiment showcased that when we have participants list commonalities of typical crimes like robberies, they're very confident listing several features. So if we ask people, list commonalities of crimes like robberies, what comes to my mind would be things like a mask, an all-black outfit, maybe a money bag, a weapon, maybe a bank. And so once they had participants write down this huge list of events, they had them come in a week later and listen to a mock trial for a robbery. What they found was that when they later asked people to recall events strictly from the mock trial, they began to infuse those same expectations into the recollection of events. So things that fit their expectations for a robbery, but did not actually occur in the actual mock trial, began to be listed as events that did occur. So again, we can see, even in crime settings, that this is highly applicable. Our expectations for events starts to guide and influence what we actually remember seeing. What's interesting about this phenomena is that this occurs despite witness confidence. In the case of Jennifer Thompson, she was really confident in her identification of Ronald Cotton as her perpetrator. And in fact, she was wrong. So I leave you with the question, can we really trust our own memories? Next time you're telling someone a really crazy story, ask yourself, do I really remember seeing that?